We begin the day with the world's first attempt at keeping the children away from social media for their own good. On Wednesday, anyone in Australia under the age of 16 was blocked access to Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, and the rest. The world's first social media ban for young people. Now, will it save the kids and teens who have not yet been sucked in by social media's algorithmic addiction? Researchers say that parents need to wake up to the unique risks that are posed to children, such as cyberbullying. But there is also the danger of kids losing important sleep, staying online, and staying awake too long, so long that it stunts their mental and physical development. Or is Australia's decision, is it an overreaction? A society that instead of coming to terms with new technology has moved instead to simply ban it. Will that really work? We have this report.
Locked in his bedroom, this 14-year-old boy spends hours every day absorbed by online games. Among his favorites is a strategy game often described by experts as mobile chess. But on top of the games he plays, he uses a long list of social media platforms.
Got Roblox, Fortnite, Steam. I've got Clash Royale. On my phone, the rest are on PC and laptop. I use Snapchat, I use Instagram barely, I use X for Fortnite and Roblox. TikTok. That's what Fortnite is, isn't it?
From now on, he won't have access to many of these platforms. Australia's ban on social media for teenagers is the toughest in the world. YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok, among others, have deactivated accounts for users under 16, and they have stopped teens from opening new accounts. Otherwise, they face fines of up to 50 million Australian dollars. The Australian government says the new law is necessary to protect children from addiction and cyberbullying. And it follows reports of a growing number of young people showing up at hospitals.
So we started seeing an increased number of young people in the hospital, in the emergency department, who were harmed. So they were isolated at the home. They had become very much reclusive. Some of them had assaulted their parents. When limits were posed, children who were refusing to go to school.
This clinic focuses on social media addiction and has treated over 350 patients since its opening in 2022. Their youngest patient was 5 years old. For now, it looks like Australian teenagers are locked out of social media. But as with many things online, it's possible to circumvent laws and regulations, so it's unclear how effective the ban will be.
Well, for more, I'm joined now by Carol Vidal. She's a child and adolescent psychiatrist. She's also an associate professor at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in Baltimore. Doctor, it's good to have you with us. Let me start by just getting your thoughts on this social media ban in Australia. Is it, in your opinion, just what the doctor ordered?
Well, thank you for having me first and for allowing me to talk about this topic. I think it's not a bad idea, and the reason why is because I feel like social media and technology is being put out into the world without previously studying the risks that for vulnerable populations like children. So in a way, the government taking the initiative to protect children and prevent any harmful effects of social media when the companies are not doing it is not a bad idea.
So you're saying basically that our children at the moment, all of whom are on social media, that they are guinea pigs, if you will, for these social media companies.
I mean, obviously the social media companies are for-profit companies, so their goal is to make money. And the way they do it is by having people engage the longest possible with the platforms, because that's how they make money because of the revenue of the ads. So in that way, they have not been shy about using tools in the social media platforms to make people be engaged with them as long as possible. So their goal is to have us engage the longest possible time that they can. So in that way, they were not doing a service, like a humanitarian service, by putting out the social media platforms out there. And I don't think they've been careful enough to study prior to putting out these platforms out in the world, the effects that they could have on children.
What do we know,
At the
Doctor?
same time,
let me just ask you, what do we know? I mean, there are lots of open questions about social media, but what do we know at this point about how social media affects children, particularly young people under the age of 16?
Yeah, I think that's the other side of it. So while we don't have enough research a priori before we put out the platforms out there, I think that we know also not enough about the effects on mental health, and I'm going to explain why. So there's these sociologists that have been studying trends of mental health problems over time. And since 2012, they've seen an increase in depression and self-injurious behaviors, especially in girls who are the ones that spend more time on social media. So they're thinking that the changes in technology and the access to social media might be the cause for these changes at the population level. At the same time, the studies that were done initially were cross-sectional studies, which means that you study a population at one point in time, and then you look in the relationship between social media use and mental health. And the people that were using more social media or more time engaged on social media were also having more depression and more anxiety. But the problem with that is that it could be that there were many causes for people to start engaging on social media, so we didn't know what the cause and the effect was. And now there's more longitudinal studies that look at your engagement on social media at the beginning and whether you end up being more depressed or not. And those are also showing that there's a relationship, and the people who engage more on social media at a certain age, years later, they also have more depression. These studies are still correlational, which means that it could be that the people that are engaging more on social media, maybe their parents are being more permissive, or they're not monitoring them enough, or they're not engaging well with other friends. So it's really like pinpointing just one cause for mental health challenges is a problem. So it's complex, I would say. Go ahead.
Doctor, what about the role of parents here? I mean, maybe could you tell us? I mean, if we read books, I'm thinking of books like The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, for example, where he talks about these hovering parents who are then neglecting their children when the children have a lot of screen time. Are parents here, should they be blamed somewhat for abdicating their parental responsibilities to technology and to screens?
I think there has been just a change overall over time in technology that we're having trouble adjusting to. I would be wary of blaming parents, because it's really hard to disengage kids when they're engaging on social media. It's a lot of effort, and it's hard for parents to do it sometimes. But I sort of agree with Jonathan Haidt in that sense that he talks about this change in the way kids were parented. Before, they were more like free range and going outside and spending more time outdoors. And I think that has radically changed. And over time, kids are spending more time indoors, and the parents feel like they're protected from danger because they're spending all this time inside the house, but that doesn't mean that they're not engaging in risky behaviors, because you can access drugs online, you can watch pornography that's not age appropriate, you can see how people have mental health problems or self-injurious behaviors. So there's a lot going on online too that parents might actually not even know at all.
What about the good things, though? I want to ask you this before we run out of time. Many teens say that social media is their only space to find community. I'm thinking about queer children, for example, people who are minorities. Could a ban like this, could it unintentionally harm vulnerable young people?
I think that was one issue that was raised, especially during the pandemic, because some of the LGBTQ kids were just confined with the family, and maybe the family were not accepting of their sexual orientation or their sexual identity. But I think ideally you would have those kids engage in person more than on social media. So that is potentially a benefit. I think a definite benefit is keeping in touch with long distance relationships or engaging in groups of people that think like you, finding information of things that you might not find somewhere else.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's some advantages. I doubt that for kids, though. I feel like maybe the benefits versus the risks have a different balance than with adults.
Dr. Vidal, unfortunately, we're out of time, but we appreciate your time and your valuable insights on this. I'm sure we'll be talking about this again. Thank you.
Right, for more on this, I'm joined by journalist Katie Silver in Sydney. Katie, good to see you. Let's start with a cynical question. The ban is in force. Are you being deafened by the sounds of phones being dropped to the floor and kids suddenly running back onto the streets to play?
No, in summary, no. But it is Wednesday. It is a school day. So maybe we haven't felt the impacts just yet. It might be more. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning here. Maybe come 3 p.m. we'll see a lot of crying faces and people getting out their cricket bats. I think that's something we're going to have to wait and see. As you heard there, that address from the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, suggesting that that's the way young people should use their upcoming Christmas holidays, that they should go out, play sport, learn an instrument, he suggested as well. Whether or not that happens, as we say, that's something we're still watching.
Katie, it does seem like this is a story the world wants to believe in, believe that a ban is enforceable too. Is it enforceable?
That is the multi tens of millions of billions of dollars question, really. I mean, as you heard there, we're hearing, for example, the fines are going to be in the order of about 50 million Australian dollars. That's about 30 million euros for social media companies that don't enforce it. So there is certainly a financial imperative. Whether or not it plays out, we have heard, for example, criticism from the opposition leader here, basically saying that maybe the party in power isn't up to scratch when it comes to implementation of this. The big issue worldwide has been governance of social media platforms. And as you say, huge amounts of interest. We're seeing countries from Malaysia, New Zealand, Denmark, Spain, all saying that they're looking at this, whether or not they might be able to mimic it in their countries. The implementation is going to be the challenge. The important and very interesting thing to note on this is there's no penalties for young people who may avert them. And there are, for example, we are hearing from influencers saying that they're going to use VPNs or that they're going to use other social media platforms or even their parents' accounts in order to get online. No fines for them, but fines for the social media companies themselves. And that does seem to be a novel way of pursuing it. It really places the burden and the financial burden in the towards big tech.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear about the fines being touted by the government, but my guess is that parents are going to be the police here. Do we have any indication whether Australian parents are willing to put their foot down and enforce the ban at home?
Well, in general, we're hearing that there's widespread support from Australian parents, and every Australian parent I've spoken with is very for this ban. So in that sense, there's a lot of support for it. Whether or not those, for example, parents of influencers are as bullish on it, we'll have to wait and see on that front. As I say, there's no penalty for kids or for their parents. So there isn't an issue for them if their kids do go on it, other than the fact that, many criticisms of social media, particularly when it comes to mental health and online addiction that was mentioned in that piece earlier. So that is one of the kind of, I guess, motivations for parents. But whether or not they do that, I guess that's a case-by-case basis.
And Katie, just finally, I grew up in Australia. I know what Australian kids are like. I wonder, do you think Australian kids are going to comply or perhaps find a way around this?
Yeah, it's a good point. I could hear from your accent. I also obviously grew up here in Australia. As you say, there is a culture here in Australia of perhaps trying to get around the rules. And we have heard, for example, 3/4. There was a survey that said 3/4 of young people are already planning to find ways to avert this. But many young people also are supportive in and of themselves. And in fact, slightly older 18 to 20-year-olds are saying, I wish this had happened during my time. So whether or not they do find ways around it, we are hearing already that potentially copycat platforms are going to be added to this list and banned in coming days. So it really depends on the speed of the lawmakers, the speed of young people in trying to get around it, and I guess the level of buy-in that we see from big tech.
Brilliant, Katie. Journalist Katie Silver in Sydney, thanks so much.
I'm joined now by Matthias Kettemann. He's a leading expert on digital media regulation at the Leibniz Institute for Media Research here in Germany. It's good to have you with us this evening. I'd like to go through some of the pros and cons of this Australian social media ban with you and maybe just get your opinion. I mean, supporters say that the law protects young people from cyberbullying and addiction. Do you agree?
No, no. It does neither of those things. Usually, prohibitions are feeble attempts to, to cut the Gordian knot of a complex social problem that governments don't want to address differently. Usually, they look for prohibitions when they're not really ready to look at all of the other policy measures which they can introduce, which are more effective and more rights consistent.
What would have been the one policy move, in your opinion, that would have been better than this social media ban?
Well, basically, any policy would have been better than such a blanket ban. Just as an example, sites should be prohibited from using certain persuasive technologies, such as targeted advertising, such as certain kinds of influencer marketing and dark patterns, things that are already prohibited under the European Digital Services Act. Australia could have looked at a ban on engagement-based recommendation systems for minors. It could have looked at prohibitions of financial incentives for using kids as influencers. There are lots of tools, including increasing digital literacy education in schools. Prohibiting accounts for under 16s seems to me and to lots of human rights scholars to be a measure that doesn't take into account the communicative rights of children, which they also have.
I want to talk about their rights in just a moment. I want to ask you, are you saying then that social media is healthier for young people and children here in Europe than it is in the rest of the world?
Well, the protection that European Union law offers is much higher than that in any other region. Not only regarding minors, but regarding internet users more generally. We have laws like the Digital Services Act that forces platforms to not arbitrarily delete content, makes them more transparent, forces them to tell us who advertises with them, forces them to fight against disinformation. So yes, the European Union's approach towards online regulation is a model that should be, and is partially globally followed.
I want to ask you now about the rights of young people. Critics argue that this ban violates young people's freedom of expression and their access to information. I assume you agree.
Yes, it does. Again, prohibitions usually are not the best way to go about it. Why not, for example, force platforms and other providers of online service to set minors' accounts to private by default, modify recommender systems to reduce harmful exposure to content for accounts that are associated with children. Platforms can do all of that, and states can oblige companies to do that. They just, in that Australian case, didn't look for those more, let's say, challenging, but in the end, more effective and more right-saving measures.
It's been said that social media is like big tobacco was in the 20th century. I mean, do you think that in a few years we will regulate social media as strictly as we currently regulate the cigarette and the alcohol industries? No, because cigarette and alcohol do not have many, let's say, positive uses. I mean, with alcohol, you can argue that it makes evenings more fun, but especially with tobacco, especially with tobacco, there are no pro-social uses of tobacco. Unlike social media has. Using social media allows you to interact with the world. It has opened up the world as a communicative space. So social media has provided a lot of good to the world as well, and it would be the worst thing possible to infringe upon our rights regarding its use. So social media is here to stay. We just have to make it a bit better. Mr. Kettemann, we appreciate your time and your valuable insights into this. We will be watching to see what happens in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you very much.